afraid to go after our own side on the theory that if we don't hold our own side accountable, the other side will. And so I would rather Republicans hold Republicans accountable than the voters at large hold Republicans accountable and put Democrats in their place. We all know what happened in 2006. You had a bunch of small government conservatives drive the national debt up to $10 trillion, and the public said, well, if you're going to be Democrats, let's just get the real thing. Brent Bozell is willing to tell the Republican Party no. It's a common theme here with the speakers we've had. You're willing to stand up to your own side and get some hate mail from them because you're doing the right thing and they're trying to do the nice thing to get them good press. So without further ado, my friend Brent Bozell. Now I know what these washcloths are for. Let's see. Okay, I know what the washcloths, so everyone last night had these cloths. It's to put the microphones on so they don't go boom in your ear. Excellent, yeah. Okay, so Brent Bozell, nice socks, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Those are fantastic.
Thank you, I'm married.
It seems like we've got short-term, long-term problems within the Republican Party of just an unwillingness to hold them accountable, but also we got a lot of guys who get out on the campaign trail. They say they love Jesus and babies, so we put them in office and they give Jesus and babies $19 trillion in national debt.
Right. You know, I think that, Eric, we conservatives have to have a long, hard conversation with ourselves and have to ask ourselves what role we've played and what's been our responsibility for the trouble that this country is in. And we don't like to, but it's a gut check that we have to take. In fact, if you look back, you will see that the last time we elected a conservative to the presidency was 1984. Why is it that we've been unable to do so? And here's the reality. In 1988, we elected a moderate because Ronald Reagan told us to. And George Bush had done a very good job as vice president. In 1992, by then he had broken his pledge on taxes. Government was starting to rise. You were starting to see the return to moderate republicanism. You had a conservative challenging him, but the word went out, the only person who can win is George Bush. So he was nominated. In 1996, you had a whole slew of conservatives running, but the word went out, only Bob Dole can win. So conservatives got behind him. In 2000, lots of conservatives were running, but the word went out, only George Bush can win, and they got behind him. In 2004, he was reelected. 2008, a lot of conservatives running. John McCain, the moderate, won, and they got behind him. 2012, Mitt Romney, same thing. Now look at the Congress. In the Congress, we know what they are, we know what they do, and then we act surprised when they do what they do. John McCain runs for the Senate. On the year he runs as a conservative, as Orrin Hatch does, as Lindsey Graham does, as so many of them do, only to give the middle finger to conservatives the moment they're reelected. But it works. It works every time because conservatives go to work for them. And then the next day, there's all this gnashing of teeth and beating of breasts because, my God, look how they're behaving. They're behaving as the moderates we knew they were. Mitch McConnell, everyone is shocked that the first thing he did, think about this, folks, 35,000 television commercials in the month of October alone pledging to end Obamacare. 10,000 commercials in the month of October alone pledging to stop the executive amnesty power grab of Barack Obama. What's the first thing they did when they won? They didn't even wait for the majority. They gave him both those things. And we act shocked. Why? We knew he was going to do it. So what's the answer? Stop supporting moderates and stop listening to Washington when they say you got to do it.
You know, when you think about it, you run through the list, the media always run these stories. You've got the Jackie Chalmers piece that she wrote, The Conservatives and the Mist piece, about how conservative media dominates the Republicans to the detriment. And the subtitle is, it will even impact their ability to pick president. This is the party that picked Richard Nixon, George H.W. Bush, Bob Dole, John McCain, and Mitt Romney. It seems like they're not actually the conservatives who are the problem picking the president.
No, look, the Republican Party is in Washington, has gone back to what was known as its Rockefeller roots back in the 1960s. There is an open disdain for conservatives in Washington, D.C. Henry Hyde, the late Henry Hyde, had this great phrase when he called conservatives the great unwashed in the eyes of Washington. That disdain is at a fever pitch right now. One of the great tragedies of politics is that the Chamber of Commerce was once the bedrock of conservatism during the Reagan years. It has gone completely to the dark side. It's not gone liberal. It's worse than liberal. It is for itself. And it doesn't matter what happens to this country. And it doesn't matter what happens to the economy. It doesn't matter what happens overseas. It doesn't matter what happens in the cultural sphere. All that matters is what they get. And what they've done is bought the Republican Party. John Boehner does the bidding of the Chamber of Commerce. Mitch McConnell does the bidding of the Chamber of Commerce. It is not conservatives that's the problem here. It is the Chamber of Commerce.
Amen. I have to, I don't know that he even knows this, but I'm crediting Brent Bozell, as I have for a long time, with one of the best pieces of career advice I ever got. I was getting off an elevator in Washington one time. You were asking me what I was doing. I was going to do RedState full time, and you pulled me out of the elevator and you looked at me and you said, "Do not move to Washington." And I've never moved to Washington. Probably the best piece of a career advice I've gotten in a long time.
I wish I'd listened to myself.
But it does seem like there are a lot of people who, they're conservatives. They are in the States and they've got a conservative record. But they go to Washington, D.C. and something happens.
Yeah, it does. It does. Look, we're not in Washington. Our offices have never been in Washington for that reason. You go to Washington, and it's a seductress. It is a mistress. You're surrounded by the grandeur of government, by the marble, by the adoring fans. As Dana Rohrabacher told me, who was a speechwriter for Ronald Reagan, when he ran for the Congress, the moment he won, suddenly the police were stopping traffic for him because they knew he was a congressman. And that allure of power is intoxicating. And then you realize the more money you control, the more powerful you become. And then you start slowly going to the left, because that's where the power is in Washington. And it only takes a matter of time. And that's why, and shameless personal plug here, but that's the reason I endorse Ted Cruz, because he's one of the few I've ever known who is never, ever going to be bought by Washington.
You're the head of the Media Research Center, which does just great work. You've got For America as well. So some of the online stuff you guys were doing with Mitch McConnell, the chicken ad I in particular remember about Mitch McConnell. Why?
That got me on some Christmas lists. What do you think?
I can imagine. Why devote so much time to For America?
Well, here's the interesting thing. My daughter Caitlin is here somewhere. That generation, my son David, my daughter, others, were pummeling me a few years ago, saying, "You have to do social media." And I said, "That's just a fad. That's nothing."
Get off my lawn.
Where's my rocking chair? And I was very loath to do it, but my children are obnoxious, and they wouldn't leave me alone. And finally said, "Okay, we're just going to scratch that itch. We'll do it." And then fine. And then we went out. We got some seed money. My God, were my children right? It is not just. It's the game changer. Social media is the political change. There's a reason Barack Obama spent $100 million. The The biggest single expenditure of the race was on social media because he knew what a game changer it is. When we started For America, we started seeing these results. They were stunning. Facebook has twice told us that we're the most engaged site on their entire platform because it's a way of connect. Just think about this one statistic. There's so many. Think of this one statistic. If you put an ad on television, 15%, 15% of the public believes it. You take that same ad and you put it on social media, the believability goes up to 78%. The reason is friends are sharing information with friends. So the For America model was to build an army of conservatives, a new army, an online army of conservatives that we could unleash on Washington. We now have over 8 million who are on that, and the Media Research Center has another 8 million that we have. And to show you the power of it, in the summer of 2012, I was at home on a Saturday morning. My son David came by and he said that he had learned that John Boehner and Barack Obama were putting the finishing touches on $1 trillion tax increase that was not being told to anybody yet. So I told him, unleash the army. We unleashed the army on Washington, on John Boehner, everywhere he went. By Monday morning, he was angrily denying there was any conversation going on. With the amnesty program last year, on a Monday, he announced that an amnesty program was going to happen and nothing was going to stop it. On Thursday, he announced there was going to be no amnesty deal and nothing would get him to do it. This is what happens when you have an army.
Well, that gets to this long-term issue with the Republican Party. Like this year, there was a story in the newspaper the other day that the Chamber of Commerce is going to try to use this year to primary any Republican who opposes John Boehner and Mitch McConnell's agenda on taxes, on climate change, on amnesty, on you name it. How do conservatives respond?
Well, the first thing we have to understand, it's like Barack Obama responding to ISIS. The first thing you have to understand is that we're at war. They have declared war on us. Mitch McConnell has declared war on the Tea Party.
Like Obama, they think we're the junior varsity.
Yeah, this is the disdain. We're in power. Thanks to you, I'm now majority leader. Thanks to you, I'm now speaker. We now control it. Mark Meadows, you speak against us, I'm throwing you off your committee. And I've got the Chamber of Commerce money, we're going to get you out of office. This is how ruthless it's become. So conservatives have to say to themselves very simply, what's more important, power or principle? What's more important, conviction or consensus? What do we stand for, conservative values or the Washington GOP establishment? And it's not a hard decision to make. And at that point, you say no more support, no more money, no more votes, no more activism to people who have a record. Just go to Conservative Review, folks. Go to conservativereview.com and look at the voting records. I want you to see this in the Senate. It is amazing. They went from A to F, gauging every incumbent Republican in the Senate by their voting record going back, I forget how many years. It's over 6,000 votes they looked at. How many senators do you believe, Republicans, got an A rating? 4. Ted Cruz, Ron Paul, Rand Paul, I'm sorry, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and 2 others. How many, I'm sorry, 3, only 3. How many got a B? 4. How many got a C? I think 7. 28 Republican incumbents received an F conservative rating.
For fantastic, right?
So what, the F?
Yes. Well, so, I mean, what do conservatives
Taping, 1, 2, 3, taping.
There seems to be a frustration now among conservatives because, I mean, look at the fight that Ted Cruz and Mike Lee led on the highway bill for Planned Parenthood. Mitch McConnell didn't want to give them credit, refused to do it. Other Republicans backed him up. What the hell does the Republican Party even stand for anymore?
Well, I don't know, but let's ask ourselves what we stand for. You know, if this horror story, that is the collective videos that have been released on Planned Parenthood, doesn't get us to stop Planned Parenthood, then as a society, I think we're finished. If we can't stop these monsters, I think we're finished. I want to point out one thing that I think has been missed in these videos. In this last video that came out, note that several times this abortionist refers to the fetuses as cadavers. Look at Webster's definition of cadavers. It's a dead body. That abortionist is saying that baby was alive and I killed her. That's exactly what she's saying. And for us to be giving $500 million to these killers, if the Republican Party can't stop that, I want nothing to do with the Republican Party.
Amen. But there are already Republicans in Washington who say, well, we can't defund them through the appropriations process because they get most of their money through mandatory spending. And if the president shuts down the government, they'll call it a Republican shutdown, and we don't want to get blamed.
Now, some of these losers in Washington, D.C., what's the first thing Mitch McConnell said? And Corker and others have said, look, we're never going to close down the government. We're never going to do that to you again. Let's talk about closing the government for a second. There is this mythology out there that when Newt Gingrich closed the government, it devastated the Republican Party. Number one, only the president can close the government. The speaker can't. Number two, look at the devastation. The Republicans the next year lost 2 seats in the House. They gained a seat in the Senate. It did nothing. Look at this last go-round. Oh, it was going to hurt. It was going to hurt. Look at the polls that were taken. After the media blamed it on Ted Cruz and Mike Lee, after the Democrats blamed him, after the Republicans blamed them, and after all those knives came out of their backs, what did the public say? 39% of the public blamed Ted Cruz and Mike Lee. 39% of the public blamed Obama. It had no effect. And oh, by the way, those people who were elected to the Senate owe one big wet kiss to Ted Cruz and Mike Lee because they would not have taken the Senate had it not been for that issue.
Anthony Skinny, so they're allowed to do that now too.
Yeah, so okay, but let me urge people to start thinking not in the short-term vision of politics, but to understand something that the left has figured out that we haven't figured out yet. Politics is not the importance. We look at politics. Everything we've been talking about here is politics. The political is not the important. It is the cultural that is important. And behind that, what's even more important is the spiritual. It's not my pay grade to be able to talk about that. But I can't talk to the cultural. The left figured out a long time ago that if you can change the culture, politics is the end game. And that's just a tipping point to get what you wanted. It's the cultural that matters. And I'll give you an example. Why was it that in 5 years, the marriage movement collapsed? Why was it that the gay rights movement has championed in the last 4 or 5 years? What happened? In the last 4 or 5 years, nothing happened. What happened back in the late 1980s. This is when the gay movement decided to go into the culture. The culture is what? The culture is academia, the culture is entertainment, the culture is news, the culture is those bodies of music where they can affect the public mind. The Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, GLAAD, there was a news report buried in the early 1990s where they got the studios to allow them to sit on the sets of TV shows in production to make sure that the correct message was coming out on these TV shows. And watch what happened. Thereafter, every TV show that dealt with the gay issue put it in a positive light. And more and more and more and more and more of it came out. And what happened in the polls? the public mood changed, with young people especially. Music, the same thing. Academia, the same thing. They conditioned a market. We have to think in those terms as well. Looking at our issues, we've got to understand where the free market is concerned. They have been attacking the capitalist system through entertainment. And that's why they make their gains. We've got to do the same thing. Our values, look at the Passion of the Christ. Look what happened when Mel Gibson put out that movie. It was a tsunami of scene change, cultural, that you could not accomplish through politics. My wish, my fervent desire, is that conservatives re-engage in the cultural battles, and that's where social media comes in, and that's where the internet comes in. You have the ability to change the entire conversation. We have to become storytellers and tell our stories to the next generation. If we become storytellers, the politics will take care of itself.
Last question for you, directly related to that. How important is it in an age when so many people, particularly on the right, are angry with the way the country's going? How important is it to laugh?
Oh boy, I think we have to remind ourselves to do that every single day. You know, so many people say, well, get over Ronald Reagan. I'm never going to get over Ronald Reagan. What Ronald Reagan brought, he brought that sense of optimism. I was very disappointed to hear Donald Trump last night say America's a loser of this, America's a loser about that, America's a loser about that. No, we're not. America's a wonderful country. America's a great company, and we have the shining city on the hill to aspire to. But while we're doing that, enjoy life. Enjoy. We have nothing to lose. We have no power in Washington, D.C. Why not throw hand grenades and have some fun while we're doing it? No, we do.